I'm a member of a Red Sox nation. It's a kind of a family. Wherever I roam, a Fenway home, that's where I long to be. I'm a member of a Red Sox nation. It's a kind of insanity. Yeah, I live and die with Red Sox pride for eternity. I fake a smile November until opening day. Suffering baseball withdrawal around the clock. When April comes, hey, meet me down on Yawkey Way. That's when Red Sox Nation starts to rock. I'm a member of the Red Sox.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 55 of the Avid Boston Podcast, presented by AVIDBOSTON.com. For everyone staying up late, as always, on Periscope, you can find the episode on SoundCloud within 30 minutes of the conclusion of this broadcast, as well as iTunes by your AM commute. Also, at the top of the Periscope box, you can find a link to the podcast section of AvidBoston.com, and you can find both of the formats there as well. And I keep forgetting to mention we are also on iHeartRadio, so just one of many options where you can find the podcast. So Red Sox wrap up their final West Coast series for the year and are eastward bound. I should say more. Well, technically eastward. They are probably going to be landing in Minnesota shortly, if they haven't already, for a 3-game set against the Minnesota Twins. For those of you new to Periscope or the podcast, I am Terry Cushman, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave Kwiatkowski. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Terry. How are you?
Not too bad. So, interesting test against another first-place team, or at least they were at the start of the series. I was a little surprised with their pitching for one, but why don't you go ahead and take us through the series?
Yeah, so it was another interesting series in a 4-game set against a division-leading team, just like we had with Houston. And in Game 1, David Price continues to be the ace of the staff as he dominates, as he spins a great game, and we win 2-1. In Game 2, Rick Porcello had a average game, something that we haven't seen from Rick too much recently, as the Red Sox bullpen actually blows a big lead. We were up 6-3 as we got to the 8th Paxton of Seattle, and we lose that game 7-6. In Game 3, the bats went to sleep as Stephen Wright continues to dominate since coming back from the DL. He gave up his first earned run in over 20 innings as we lose a heartbreaker 1-0. And today, the bats come alive to pick up some slack as Erod pitches an actual quality start for the first time in what feels like a month. And Rafael Devers gets back in hot as the Red Sox win 9-3 to split the series in Seattle.
And I guess against the division-leading team, we'll definitely take a split every time, as we did earlier with the Houston Astros. So,
I'll take a split any day of the week, especially when we have a bullpen meltdown the way we did
on Friday night, yes, and I'll get into that more in depth further into the podcast. Also joining us, as he often does, one half of the Double Coverage podcast, which could be found on iTunes. You can find him on Twitter at Cap Hartsfield. Austin Hartsfield, how are you?
I'm good, Terry. How about you?
Pretty good. Thanks to today. I was pretty miserable coming into today, guys, as we were kind of talking about, like, the bullpen.
That's an understatement for this weekend.
Well, hey, I was trying to be Mr. Positive for a change, coming into the series. We had the last guy on, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to win it 3-1. And, Dave, you were, as always, a little bit more accurate. And you're like, well, I think it's going to be a split. And that's what it was. And although if the bullpen did their job, I think I would have been right. But yeah, and I just, the bats have been finicky off and on, and each time we go to the West Coast, we run into a pitcher who seems to pitch the game of his career, which kind of happened with LeBlanc, and then Sean Manaea earlier in the year with the no-hitter against us. So, but, it's a long season. It's just part of the grind, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen. I mean, I think that this was a series just like after our big start, 17-2, we played 500 ball for like 10 or 20 games, and everyone was kind of freaking out saying what's going on. But we had a few injuries. But the main thing was any day that the bats did well, the pitching sucked. Any day that the pitching was lights out, the bats went to sleep. And I think this series was a perfect example of that just kind of happening again, where if the bats just didn't score 9 or 6, we would have swept. I mean, the bullpen had a bad blunder, but we scored 9 today. We couldn't score 1 yesterday, and we only scored 2 on the first day of the series. So I think that it was just a kind of bad case of luck when it comes to that. But this was a sweep. This was a sweep waiting to happen, and we ended up splitting. But we could have easily swept this series, and it wouldn't have shocked me if we did the way when it all was said and done.
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised King Felix pitched as well as he did. I was thinking blowout for sure that game, and Price is really, I would say at this point, is the best pitcher on the team. He's had the most consistent last 6 or 7 weeks anyway, and I figured with him going that first game, I was thinking no way they win, and we would probably thump King Felix because he was pitching close to a 6 ERA and seems to be giving up 4 or 5 earned runs pretty consistently, at least over the last month. And he actually pitched a very good game, and I think that's more to his credit than our offense not performing the way they should.
Yeah, I agree. He can get hot, and he's still a really good pitcher when he is hot, and he just had a really good start. I mean, his last 4 starts, he gave up, 5, 1, 5, and then 1 or something like that off the top of my head. So he's been very hit or miss recently, just like all season. But I think Price has been the best guy the last month or two. Since he's gotten back from carpal tunnel, he's got like a 2.25 ERA, something ridiculous like that. And Sale hasn't been Sale like the past, really this season he hasn't been, if we're being honest. His velocity is up more, but he's throwing a lot more pitches. People are fouling balls off a lot more. He's not punching guys out as fast as he used to last year. So, he's been a little off, and obviously Porcello's been solid. Erod, is a 5 1/3, 5 2/3 monster, and Drew Pomeranz shouldn't even come back this year. So I think Price has been great, and right now would be our number 2 going to the playoffs.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, he's our best pitcher, so I mean, take that for what it is. I mean, the rotation in the playoffs will probably dictate itself based on what the race looks like the last week of the season. But another thing with Sale, though, that bothers me is his walk rate just seems to be up, or at least lately he's given up at least 3 or 4 walks per game, it seems like, and last year he didn't walk anybody really.
Yeah, he's just been a little bit off this year, and obviously a little bit off for him is still, around the 3 ERA with, averaging like 9 or 10 strikeouts a game, whatever it is, his last handful of starts. So he's still pitching very well, but we're used to seeing him go 7 and 8 innings all the time, and we're seeing a lot of 6 innings, 100 pitches, or 7 innings, 110 pitches, where it's just not the same command. I know he had that issue where he was kind of switching up his delivery, and then they've been kind of correcting that a little bit. They talked about it on the broadcast last week or 2 weeks ago, and he's tweaked that a little bit, but I think he'll figure it out. Obviously, he's still one of the best pitchers in the American League, so I'm not really too worried about him. I think the pitching staff's been great, and the bullpen, I know you're worried, Terry, but I think they're allowed one blunder every once in a while, and other than that, they've been lights out. If you look at the rest of the series, I mean, they were good in Game 1, they were good in Game 3, they were good today. I mean, we had kind of like our 13th option in there today in the 8th and 9th inning, so I wasn't too worried about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like Barnes hasn't been too sharp over the last few weeks. I don't have his stats up in front of me, but
He's kind of sure. I have to hold my breath sometimes when Embry come in.
yeah, and that's the problem. And Joe Kelly, for whatever reason, can't pitch necessarily every day. Three outs every day, I should say. Sometimes they've been bringing him in, to bail out Barnes or Hembree, with runners on base. But so you really need somebody to pair him with, and there's no obvious solution right now as to who that could be. Hasn't Velasquez struggled as well as of late?
He did he pitched good today. He pitched an inning and a third and only gave up one hit, but he was struggling a little bit. He had like one or two shaky starts, but then he got back on track. He's similar to where, every once in a while he'll have a stinker that will kind of make him not look as good, but he's been overall pretty good. I actually saw a wild stat about him that since last year he leads the MLB in ERA or something like that.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, just because of like qualified minimum 30 innings or something like that. I mean, this year he's got a 1.85 ERA in 34 innings in games. So I mean, he's doing well.
Yeah, I mean, and we could still have a solution in-house. I mean, if the trade deadline were tomorrow, I would probably look for a bat, to plug somewhere 6th to 8th in the order. I just feel like JBJ and Vasquez are just not going to be reliable. And when you look in the bottom third of the Yankees order, I know we're leading in a lot of key stats right now, but it's not by a lot. And I just feel like when Gleyber Torres, Greg Bird, and someone else, I forget who else is in the bottom third of their order fairly regularly, but I mean, we need our bottom third to be consistent, and I'd rather bring someone in that can give us that, and and then getting back to the bullpen. I mean, if they make a move there, fine, but I mean, if Velasquez steps up, I feel a lot better. Even if Barnes, just continues to basically be a 3-something ERA guy, I'm fine as long as we don't have to continually rely on him in high leverage situations. And then if, like you like to say, if Tyler Thornburg does exist, maybe that's a solution. But
I saw a picture of him on Twitter. I didn't see the last name on the jersey, so I still don't believe.
But was it him? Like, have we ever actually seen his face?
I've never seen him in the room, with like
in a Red Sox uniform.
Yeah, like it just doesn't happen. I mean, he is, for all intents and purposes, our trade deadline acquisition. I mean, I think he'll be back realistically for the All-Star series, after that. And he is the 7th inning guy. Joe Kelly's your 8th inning guy. The guy's been nails all year. He's clutch. I trust him against very good batters at this point. He's worked in multiple pitches. He's not just a fastball down the pipe guy like he used to be. My whole thing with Joe Kelly, obviously I wasn't on the podcast last year, was I don't care if he throws 102, 101 regularly. He throws it down the pipe with no movement, and it goes out faster than it comes in. But he's added a little bit of movement to the fastball. He's added other pitches, and he's proved that he can handle every situation. And every once in a while he'll have a little bit of blunder. So will Kimbrel, who cares? But Thornburg could be that 7th inning guy. And on top of that, when you get to the rotation, when you get to the playoffs, we're going to shorten our rotation. You're going to see Stephen Wright most likely back in the bullpen for 6th and 7th innings, or 7th inning, or 5th and 6th if it's a bad start, or Erod throws 100 pitches in 4 innings like he does sometimes. And you could see David Price moved around a little bit. Obviously, right now, we want him as a starter, but it doesn't mean that he might not go in the bullpen for some long relief if we need him to be. So I think a bat is more necessary. JBJ, you need him for his defense, but a bat off the bench would be great. Who cares about catching? Because no one's going to – I mean, there's no catching out there.
There's like 3 good catchers in Major League Baseball, if we're being completely honest.
Exactly. And then you have Devers, who has been heating it up recently. Holt's been good all year. So, I mean, right now our top 7's been really consistent the past couple weeks and has been turning it on. And then you kind of just say JBJ and Vasquez and Sandy just go out there and play defense.
It's a good problem to have when 1 through 7